Cool. So I have this website. This is our user authentication app, right? Now I have that, and I also have our backend running on, I forgot the exact URL, so let's see it here. Yeah, this one is user-auth-alejo@herokuapp.com, and this one we could do. So is it users? Oh, the server seems to be failing. It wasn't failing. Let's open the logs here. Let's see. Slash. We have slash users, right? Oh. Let me open this in. Let me try that same request on Postman. So let's try to get all the users. Huh. I think this is. I guess we could also just run it locally. Okay, let's go check out master. So I'm gonna run. Let me open these in code. I think I have them here. So I have here backend. We are setting course. Everything is the same. This one already has the change in here. We already have process env database URL to get the database URL from the environment. And our front end is the one that we were working with in the past. Oh, something that I did here change in the front end is I have an env.local that has this React app underscore API URL. This is how we can have environment variables for the React app. I need to do this because once my React app is running on Netlify, I don't want it to send requests to localhost. I want it to send requests to my Heroku app, right? And then in here, this is where I will specify whenever the app is built, use this step. This is the URL for my backend. But that's not that important. Let's look in here. I'm gonna run locally my front end and then my backend as well. Start dev. And right now, my front end is running on port 3000 and my backend is in 3100. And let's look at what we have here. So I can try to log in. It's actually going to let me log in. Oh, let me make sure that I remove if I have any cookies. I have these all cookies, so let me remove that. Refresh the app. So let me see. I think this cookie should not be there. Let's log in. Yeah, no, this is still working. Let me see. Because I was experimenting with this. Let me remove all this. And I'm just going to remove this. Cool. I think we should be good to go now. So here, note that in my two things. One is I don't have in my package.json in the front end. Let me remove the proxy. So I'm not going to have the proxy. Let's restart this. And then my URLs in the front end will now need to look like this. But again, this is all some of the changes that we would have need to do if we deploy our app to Netlify. So this is just sort of we haven't gotten to the problem yet, and we can see here that I get that URL from the environment. When I'm developing locally, that URL is going to be localhost to point to my backend. When my app is running on Netlify, it's going to be the actual URL for my backend. So let's then go back here, our app. Let's open the. Let me remove any cookies that I might have, and refresh. Cool. I'm not getting the cookie. That's good. Close this here. Now, let's see our network here. Let me clear this out. As the app first loads, we're making this request. Is user logged in, right? And this request right now, we can see that it's going to localhost 3100, which is our backend, auth/ is user logged in, and we're getting 401 unauthorized. That's because we're not logged in. So let me clear this out and let's log in. I think this user is logged in. Let's send it. We got login successfully, 200. That all looks good. And note here that in the response, we got the cookie. This is the cookie. Now this cookie, this cookie should be sent on any other request. So when I go to users, remember that when we go to users, we make a request to localhost 3100/users. Right now, I'm getting 401 unauthorized because this request, if we go to the request headers, which are here, is not sending the cookie along with it. The browser is not sending the cookie along with the request. That is a security measure that browsers have. Because whenever you're sending, whenever a third party set a cookie on your browser, that's most likely to track you to advertisers. And when you go to certain websites that they ask you to enable third-party cookies, is because those third parties want to set cookies in the website you're currently on to track and advertise to you. So right now, this is the problem we're having, this is the problem that I didn't foresee yesterday when we're developing an application that has user authentication, just because we're using cookies for that user authentication to remember the user session in the backend. This method doesn't work in that case. There are other methods of user authentication that we're not going to see. There's one called JSON token, where every request, instead of having a cookie, every request has a token attached to it, and that token is verified every time it touches the backend. That will be a way in which we could have this working in Netlify again, but it's because it will be a completely separate system, not through cookies, but through tokens, which are a different thing. Okay, so this is the problem, that the user seems to be logged in, but the cookie doesn't travel in any of the other requests because that cookie comes from another domain. There is a way to get around this that will require more setup on our side. That's also why we're not going that route, where the server can say in the course configuration to sort of tell the browser it's okay to save the cookie and to send it in subsequent requests. The problem is that then if a user has this setting enabled in their browsers, which some come with it, where in your browser, if you go to your settings, even if you're in Firefox, there is this setting about blocking third-party cookies. This our cookie right now is a third-party cookie. If the user has this enabled, if we try to get around that with course, which we can, but the user has this setting enabled, then they're not going to be able to use our app because our app requires the cookie to be set for remembering the user. And you can see here, like third-party cookies are when on sites can't use your browser activity across different sites to personalize ads. Some sites may not work properly. So if a user doesn't want websites to set third-party cookies, then our app stops working, basically. So instead of trying to get around that, what we're going to do is this approach, where we have our backend that is running on Heroku, and our backend will have the built front end in it. And this way, then our application, our backend and our React app will be on the same domain, which will let us set cookies, and the cookie will travel on any later request as the front end makes requests to it. I note here that I say is the built-in front end. It's not the React app. Is the compiled version of that React app. So to do that, all the backend setup that we did yesterday still applies. All that will be the same. Now, one thing here will be, so just like with anything in technology, there are trade-offs. The advantage of this, right, was, well, we can have two separate apps. They can evolve independently. We touch the code of one without affecting the other one. That's great, right? Now, that we were getting that benefit at the expense of the cookies stopping working. Now the other side is this side, where we have one app with the other one inside, so they can't evolve as independently, but we have the cookies settings that will let our app have user authentication. we could find a middle ground where we could still have two separate apps that we have in different repos and that we deploy to one in Heroku. We're not going to have time to see that, and it will require some custom scripting that we could do for still have two separate repos, and then maybe create our own custom command, maybe npm run deploy, that will build our front end, put it in the back end, and then deploy. Let's see. Maybe we can do that and to see if it will be complicated. Okay, so let's start with our apps being in one repo for now. Or any questions so far? Oh, note also that, well, this is another trade-off is if we have our apps in separate domains, then I need to do this. I need to sort of plug in the URL of the backend in all my network requests, right? We had enabled the proxy in the past, and who remembers what that did? What the proxy in our package.json, on the front-end package.json did? Dinesh? That's correct. It made it so that we didn't have to put the full URL here. We could just say this. And how was that working? So yes, we don't have to put the full route, but how is it that we don't have to put the full route? Why?
Because the route is using that component, that separate file is only used for the route at the beginning of that route, so localhost / whatever section you're in, and then it lets you add on afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right. So we set up our proxy, and we could imagine that all the requests that don't have any HTTP before it, like this one, will be sort of rerouted to the one in the proxy. But the way, and I think this is sort of important to remember, the way in which that works is because our React apps, the way in which we develop it is sort of has a server that's a Webpack server. I think this is a Webpack dev server, and then we have our, our HTML, JavaScript, and CSS code, and then our code is going to make a NET request to /auth/ is user login. And because it doesn't have HTTP localhost before it, what happens is that it's going to make the NET request sort of to itself. And it's actually asking, the NET request is going to the Webpack server. And then the Webpack server says, oh, if I don't find this in me, if I don't find that in the Webpack server, that means that that request has to be proxied, forwarded to the backend. So in this case, when we make that request /auth/ is user logged in, that request is sent to the Webpack server. That's there. The Webpack server doesn't find it in any of its routes because it doesn't have any, and it forwards that to our backend. This is all through the proxy setting that we have. Now, once we have our deployed version, that will still be true because now the apps will be running on the same domain. So this will be sent to the backend, to our our backend, because again, it will be running on the same domain. The proxy, once we build our app, the Webpack server goes away, because the Webpack server is sort of a nice developer experience that lets you do hot reloading, for instance, and other cool things. Once we build our app, the Webpack server goes away, and our app then becomes a bundle of just JavaScript code, HTML, and CSS. And we're actually going to get to see that. And then we just put this code in here, literally, this code, this HTML, JavaScript, CSS, once it gets compiled, we're going to put it in here. And when that code makes network requests to /auth/ this user login is going to make those requests to its own domain, to its own, to now our backend. You could think of it as, we're changing servers here. And here, the Webpack server is letting us, it's enhancing our developer experience. But once and that's the one that is serving our app. Once we build our app, we just put the build app in our front end for the build app in our backend so that backend can serve it. So we're gonna go back to this, which, well, you didn't change. So I'm gonna get rid of all these API URLs. And if I get rid of all these APIs URL, my app will start working again, and it's going to start working again because the request is being made to the server, to the Webpack server, and from there it's being forwarded to our backend. When it's being made to the Webpack server, when it's being made to the Webpack server, this server is not it's not running in the browser. This is a node server, just like our Express app is a node server. It's just that this one is in charge of looking at files and when they change, reload the app. But that request is being made to this server, which then forwards the request. This server cores don't apply to it. Cores don't apply because when you make a network request from a node application to another node application, none of them are a web application, cores don't apply to them. Cores is only for browser applications and to prevent and to enhance security in browser applications. So once we go back to this, the cookie that our backend is given back to the Webpack server, and then our app sees that as coming from within itself. So let's actually get to it. I gotta remove everything that said API URL, so let me find and replace here. And I'm gonna replace that with this. You probably never did this change, so there is nothing you need to change there. And now I'm gonna put back my proxy in the front-end package JSON. Let me just do this. Put the proxy back there. Let's restart both our servers. Let's see, let's go to network. Our user login is currently failing. That's because we don't have a session. Let's log in. Let's actually also look at the, let's look at the cookies. Let me refresh this. I erase the cookie. I'm gonna reload the app. And we see that the cookie is set immediately after I refresh the app. This is because the app, my front end, is making a network request to check if the user is logged in, which is this network request, this one. And the server, we can actually see it here, the response request that the server gave had a set cookie. This will set the cookie. And now it's being saved properly because this request is being seen as coming from the same domain my app is running on. That's all thanks to the proxy. If I go to application again here, now I see the cookie there. So you are given the cookie as soon as you make a network request to it. It's just that this cookie is not associated with any user session. When I log in, the cookie becomes associated with the user that logged in, and it doesn't actually change. Now I log in. I was redirected. We could go back to, we see that the cookie didn't change. This is the same cookie. And when I go to network now, and I check the login request, we can see that in the request headers, remember these are the headers that are going out with the request, we have the cookie there. So our cookie is being sent, and it's being sent because it was set from the same domain, thanks to the proxy. So now I'm able to access the users and so on. And that cookie, if I inspect this other user's request, that cookie is always traveling with the request. This is I guess a feature of cookies or characteristic. Cookies are always sent with the request. They're always sent if the request is going to the same domain that the cookie was received from, right? Which is our backend. And right now we're sort of tricking the React app. We're tricking the React app, making it think that our backend is the Webpack server, right? That's why when our code makes a request, you see also this. This is another indicator. You see when our code makes a request, it still, the request still seems to be going to the front end, to the 3000, not 3100, right? It seems to be going there. And there, what we have there running is the Webpack server. It's just that the Webpack server will forward that request. So it is, we have sort of this flow. We have this flow. We have our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code that makes a request to the Webpack beta server, which in turn then make a request to our backend. Our code, this is our code, is making that request to localhost 3000. This compromises our React app. And it's just because we're still developing, we have that Webpack server there, right? Our code makes the request to /localhost 3000/users. That request comes to the Webpack server. The Webpack server says, oh, I have a proxy. Well, it says first it tries to check within its own routes, but it doesn't have any. We don't configure this one. This one is already configured for us. We could configure it, but that's not the point. This one doesn't have any routes set up. So it checks within its routes. /user is not there, but it says the proxy. and it says, oh, I'm going to forward this request to whatever this URL in the proxy is, and that URL in the proxy is our backend. Now our backend replies, and here is this communication is, this is a Node app, a Node server, and this is a Node server. The Webpack forwards the request to our backend replies to the Webpack server, and then the Webpack server replies back to our code, and then our code sees that as coming from the Webpack server. Our code doesn't have any idea that that request actually traveled to our backend. Our code is completely unaware of where that request is coming from. Our code thinks that that's coming from within itself, from within our Webpack server. And then because it's coming from the Webpack server, the server our application is being served from, then the cookie is set, we have no problems with a third-party cookie. What we were doing before was something more like this. Our code is making a request to a different domain. This one is in 3001. This one is in 3000. Then our backend will reply back with a cookie. Well, it says, oh, that cookie doesn't come from where the website is being served. The website is being served on 3000. Then the cookie is not saved and is not sent along in any other request. Right now, we have our cookie being sent with any of those other requests. Even when I log out, if I look at the logout request, you see that in the request headers, these headers are being sent from our app to the server. We see our cookie there, and so on. So that's sort of all the reasoning behind it. Let's actually then see how we get these two apps to work as one. Yes? No more Netlify unless we're an app that uses user authentication. We just with everything inside. We're just gonna have Heroku. We're just gonna deploy to Heroku with everything. Also, I shared this article. This is it's a question I think is in online resources. This is a question you might get in an interview about sort of the different ways that are in which we can create websites. Basically, there are dynamic sites, dynamic websites, static websites, and single-page applications. The applications that we build are this kind, single-page app. That is because, hopefully that will make more sense in a few minutes. But that is because we know that our routing, for instance, when we show different pages in our front end, that's actually an illusion, right? This browser is not loading an entire new page from a browser. That's all being handled by JavaScript running in the website. Just sort of a quick introduction. Static page is when you have in your server all the HTML already written and the CSS is all written and there's nothing to be changed. Things don't change often, like Wikipedia, for instance. Wikipedia is probably a static page where the content is written in the HTML directly, and that doesn't change. It's not an app, right? A dynamic site, the example that I use here is Amazon is a dynamic site, where when you log in on Amazon, you see your own recommendations, you see your past orders and all that, and all that HTML is not written, beforehand in some server saved in Amazon. That HTML is being generated dynamically when you make a request to Amazon with something called a templating engine or templating language, like Pug, Jade, or EJX. So this is a good read. As I said yesterday, Netlify is great for static pages, where everything is already in the HTML, or you can still deploy a React app as long as that React app doesn't use cookies for any user authentication. Now, our single page applications, they're more dynamic because what happens is we're going to make a net request to our Heroku backend, and Heroku will reply with an index.html file. And that index.html file will be sort of the entry point for our single page application, where once the request is received, the backend sends the HTML file, and that HTML file just loads a bunch of JavaScript, and then from there is all JavaScript in the browser when you go to a different route in front. Okay, so let's start with having then our folder. So we can do, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quit this from here. Quit this. Also, let me quit this server here. I'm going to commit these changes. These changes that I did here in the backend was to remove course, to remove the course configuration that I had added. If I go git diff, yeah, this was when I was trying to find a workaround the cookie problem. So you don't have to care much about that. So I'm going to do git add everything. Git commit, remove course detail config. Cool. And I'm just gonna push this to GitHub. Origin. Now we can still have our two folders, backend and frontend, but they're going to need to live in the same repository, in the same GitHub repo. As I said, there is, I don't know the exact way, but we could still get it to work having it in two separate repos. I'll leave that for the end if we deem necessary, or if you want to do that, just you can come to me and we can write a small shell script that will do it for you. So right now I have this git status. I have my backend in an independent repo. This is the repos that I'm handling. Let me show it to you. GitHub. So here I have deployment front end, deployment backend. This is what I showed you yesterday, basically. Two GitHub repos, one to Heroku, one to Netlify. So what I need to do now is actually have one repo with two folders, front end and back end. So maybe I'm gonna create a new repo here where it's sort of the combined version. So let's go here. I'm gonna call it deployment full stack. Now, if you started with your project with one GitHub repo and two folders, then you're good to go. I just need to do this because I initially had them separated. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back one folder, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it just the same. I call the repo deployment backend. And more than these specific steps that I'm following are not that important as sort of the idea and the approach that what we're doing. So it's better to have that clear. So feel free to ask any questions. So here I have this deployment. Not deployment backend. I wanted to call it deployment full stack. So I'm gonna rename it deployment full stack. Now I have deployment full stack. Now what I will do is I need to move the front end and the back end to there. So I'm gonna do that. Move the back end to deployment full stack and move the front end to deployment full stack. I'm gonna do cd deployment full stack, and I have my back end and my front end. Now this is basic setup. Now I will need to make my deployment full stack a GitHub repo and push it to GitHub, right? There is a problem with that, that because of the scale of this application, it doesn't really matter much. But since these two, the backend and the frontend, are already Git repos, you can't have a GitHub repo inside of another GitHub repo, at least not easily. So what we need to do is remove the Git folders from the backend and the frontend, and then create one in the main repo. Again, if you start from scratch and you have frontend, just one repo, frontend and backend, you are all set. Right now, because I started separate and now I'm trying to combine them, I'll have to remove the Git repo from here and from here. Let's try this. I'm gonna try to create a Git repo in here in my current folder with Git init. I suspect this is gonna give us a warning saying, oh, you're creating a Git repo in that already has a Git repo in any of its subfolders. Okay, so we didn't get any warning. So this let us initialize an empty Git repo in deployment full stack Git. Now, let's do ls-la. What that did is it created this Git folder. When you do Git init and when you clone a repo, you have this Git folder. That's what makes it a Git repo. If I do Git status, note that I haven't removed the Git from backend and frontend. I want to see if we get a warning or anything. No, we don't get a warning. We just see the two files. We will get a warning if we do try to git add. Let me show you first that if I do ls-la and I want to list the contents backend auth, I see that backend, this is backend auth, has a Git repo there. If I try to git add everything, then I'm going to get a warning saying you've added another Git repo in repository inside your current repository. Clones of the outer repository will not contain the contents of the embedded repository and will not know how to obtain it. If you want to add a submodule, use blah, 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 and so on. The way in which you can keep a repo inside of another one is called a submodule. We're not going to get to see that. But let's then fix this. Let's do git status. And what I need to do is I need to get back to being everything on tracked. So I need to do this. Git rm cache git. Let's see. Oh, I guess I can't do that now. Well, let's do let's start from scratch. I'm gonna remove the repo that I just initialized, that I initialized wrongly because the inner folders had Git repos. So if we do ls la, we see our Git repo there. So I'm going to do git remove or rm recursively and force that git that got rid of it. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to the backend, and I'm also going to remove the git. Now it's gone, and I will do the same in the front end. Now, again, I'm doing this just because of the initial setup we started with. You should think twice whenever you're removing your Git repo, especially because you're basically destroying your Git history. Once I add and commit to the new repo that I started, everything is going to appear as if written in one commit. So you want to be careful, or you want to make sure that you understand why you may want to remove your Git repo. That it might not be, that you have a good reason for it. So I'm going to remove our Git. We don't have a Git anymore. Now let's go back to our main folder. Here we don't have a repo. Let's now initialize one, git init. Let's do git status. We see our two untracked folders. Let's do git add everything. We see all our files. Good thing that node modules are not being tracked. Now let's git commit. I'm gonna do combine front and back and into single repo. And then we see that one, we didn't get any warnings because we didn't have any inner Git repos. This had succeeded then. The next step will be just to push it to GitHub, basically. So that's where I created that repo here. And from here, if we look at this, now that we have a little bit more experience with Git, what this is doing is adding a remote called origin that points to GitHub and just pushing to that branch. If we try to do git remote -v, we get nothing because we don't have any remotes. That is what's connecting our local repo to GitHub. So let's just copy these two lines. That adds a remote. The second line pushes, and we should be then good to go.
What was the remove command once more?
The remove or remote?
Remove.
To remove the Git folders. It was rm for remove. Yeah. R for recursively is you now have a sense of what trees are, right? Even if you don't understand all the ins and outs, you know that it's this data structure that has some nodes and has branches and so on. Well, it turns out that your files, that's why you call it your directory tree. It's actually a tree, the ones that we have seen. And this recursively is go to a folder. If that folder has more folders, go into those folders and remove everything in those folders. And if those folders have folders, then go into those and remove those folders as well. So this is going recursively to eliminate all the subfolders that might be there. And then F is for forcing, and then the name of the name of your directory. You never want to do rm/rf/. If you do this, then all your files are going to be removed, and your computer is not going to boot up the next time you try to bring them. People joke about running this. So Be careful. The remove command is very destructive. This doesn't send it to the trash. This actually erases it forever. Okay, so we sent that to GitHub. If we refresh now here, let me share this repo with you if you want to look at what we have there. But basically, in the backend, let's see what changes we have in the backend. Let me close all this stuff. Deployment full stack, backend. In our backend, we have the same stuff we did yesterday. We have a database URL in an env file. In DB, we are reading that database URL to process that env database URL. That's all the same. Our seed file has those 3 lines commented for running the seed in Heroku. What was another change that we made? Maybe it was in app. Oh yeah, in app we load the environment file with the variables with require.env.config. We saw that yesterday, and that was all the changes that we did in the backend, right? We saw here that in www, this is gonna try to pick it in the port from the environment if it's there. Otherwise, it's gonna use 3100, and that's pretty much it. Yes.
If you put the required in the app, all the others, like supplements and
Say that last part a little bit louder.
if you put that in the app too, so all the other folders in the next
All my folders. Oh wait a minute. Here yes, all my files will have access to the environment. Yes. Is that the question? Yes. However, www will, if I try to access here like the database URL, it's not gonna have it. Just because www is importing my app. So if we wanted to load it at the very top, we should load it here. But for our application, it's okay if we just load it in the app. Because yeah, this is if it loads it from the port. Other questions? So I notice here now we have this .netlify. I'm gonna remove this. This .netlify was when we were deploying to the netlify, so I'm gonna remove it. Maybe I'm gonna need to commit that. Oh, also I don't need this one anymore. .env.local. This netlify Tom, we don't need that. Cool. Let me commit this stuff. So git add. Git add. You probably do it like this. Git add that dot. This will add all the files in your current directory. So if you're in a subfolder, if you change something in DB and you are in the DB folder and you do git add everything, this is gonna git add period. That's gonna add all the stuff that is in the DB folder. If you have other stuff outside of the DB folder, that's not gonna be added. You may or may not want that. What did I do here? This git add dash capital A adds everything from any folder in your repo. That's a subtle difference you may want to be aware of. Do git status, and then let's do git commit remove netlify files. Git push, that push to GitHub. And now for actually how we're gonna get these two apps to work together. So we talked about how we have a React app, and that React app is going to be compiled into a few JavaScript and HTML files. Let's actually see that. I'm in the front end, and in the front end, I'm going to run this command, npm run build, like this. npm run build. That is going to, this is starting to compile the app, the front-end app, and we're going to see that the output is going to be a new folder called build, and that has a few files with all our code in. Our code will be, I think, unrecognizable, but all our code will be there. So let's see, it's saying create an optimized build. It already finished. So this is what is printing. Let's see if we can, right. And then we can see here, all our code was put in only 4 files. And even if you have a big app, I think there's always going to be very few files that end up. And all these files, these are all code. Chunk.js, another chunk, main chunk.js, runtime main.js, another chunk CSS. So let's actually look at that. So this created a new folder. If we do git status, we should see it, I think. Oh, we don't see it because it's ignored by the git ignore. But if we do ls-la, we see this new folder. This folder was created at 8:19, is 8:20. And let's cd there, cd build. Oops, build. Let's do ls. Now, all of these are our application. Let me show you here. Maybe if I open these files. This is our application. All our JavaScript code is here. I think it's in here. Static, JS, and it's all here. So any access request that I made is here. Let's open one of these. And it looks like this. But this is our code, and this will run, and it will work. Let's see if we try to find Axios. Oh, there it is. There's a few Axios. Oh, I think even Axios itself gets pulled into our bundle. And you can see that this is even all written in one line. This is line 3. And, you know. Anyway, this is all our code. This set state. Set state. There's our set state. And other stuff. Anyway, this is our code. This is then the compiled version of the app. This compiled version, we're going to give it to Express for Express to serve it. And then the user will see in the browser our application running. But this is, you know, all the JSX code that we write, we call that source code. And this one we call compile code. Source code is human readable. Compile code is not. Compile code is, especially in JavaScript, you could reverse engineer it from here, but you'll have a hard time. You see, like functions names get reduced to just one letter, for instance, and stuff like that. This is to save space, to make our sort of compress our files as much as possible, as well as protect from anyone sort of inspecting our code and maybe easily finding a bug and then exploiting that bug. You can still reverse engineer the app from this, but it's you know, they're going to have a hard time. Okay, so we have built our React app. Now what do we do with it? So let's go back here. Oh, this index.html is the one that is going to, this is going to become sort of the entry point for our app. So to have Express serve this, what we need to do then is add a few lines to our app.js. Let's go to app.js. Oops, I guess I need to open it from here. Backend app.js. So you see this line here. You use this line, people that were doing like uploading files to your backend and serving those images. You were putting those images probably in public, right? what we're going to do is, and so you will put in images in public so that anything that you put in public, in the public folder, will be publicly available, right? What we're going to do is I'm just going to copy this line. It's going to be the same thing, but here I'm going to point this to go to my front end. So I'm going to do, my front end is in the parent folder, or the so I need to go one level up, then front end auth, and /build. So it's like that. What this is going to do is it's going to make the content of the build folder publicly available so that we can access it. And then right here, this index router, we're not used to it, we can remove it. Here, let's do, actually I'm kind of forgetting this step, so let's go in here. All these instructions that I'm giving you are available in the same repo that we had yesterday, which was so GitHub join pursuit core web. I was recently shown this extension for GitHub that is kind of cool, called Octotree, and it lets you explore your repo as if it was your folder. So it's kind of helpful. It's a Chrome extension called Octotree. You can install. It's probably available for Firefox as well. This is deployment README. So in the deployment folder, you can see that there are two READMEs. There's these were the instructions that we followed yesterday. This README, and there, if you go to deployment, so there's README.all.md. This is what we use. This is what we're gonna do. What we're doing now, basically. Right, and then this is the other line that I needed. Cool. So we're going to do in here, at the end, we're going to add another route, basically, add that use. And we're basically saying anything that was not handled by this routes app top here, just fall in here. This is sort of a wild card, saying everything else, just go in here. And we're gonna say res for our route handler, and we can just say res.send file. And the file that we want to send is the one that is our HTML file. Sorry about all that. That is in the build folder in our front end. So we're gonna say path.join dir name. This dir name is the current folder that this app is running from, which is backend. So relative to that, I have to do, actually I think there's a better one, not path.join. I think we can do path.resolve. Then path segments, yep. And then we can say dir name here, comma, rather than concatenating. Parent folder, front end folder, front end, what did I call it? Front end auth, /bill /index.html. And I think this should be it. Now, what this is doing is I'm going to now run only my backend server. On my backend server, when it receives a request that is not going to any of these, is going to execute this line. This line is going to send my index HTML, which is part of the output of building the React app, and we should now see, the user should now see their app. So let's do, yes? Two dashes. This is a sort of another global variable that's always like console and process. Let's console log it. Console.log dir name. Two underscores. Now I'm gonna run the app. I'll do npm run start dev. And let's see if we got their console log. So you see, this is dir name is this. It's a string with the path that points to the directory where my app is running, basically, right? Which is backend. Now, from here, then I want to go, relative to this path, I need to go one level up or one directory up with ... which ends up putting it in the root directory, which is deployment full stack. And then from there we go to frontend auth /bill /index HTML. And now if I go to my browser and I type in my backend URL, which is 3100, we get this, which is we reach the index route, right? Now let's try to access something that doesn't exist, like 1, 2, 3. We get to our React app. You go login, sign up, and this is our React app. Note now that I'm not running the React app with npm start. This is the built React app. We see everything works. If we try to log in, we are logged in. We go to users, network request works. But this app that we're seeing, in fact, let's actually try to inspect the code here. You see it has, these are our chunks, our files. If we're trying to inspect like the components, we're gonna see that all their names change to, like TW, something that's almost, hard to decode. If we try to look at the code, we're just gonna see, all that random stuff that we saw. Opening a new tab, But this is our app. This is our built app. Now, if I want to make any changes, I'll make those changes in my JSX code, in my source code, and I'll have to build again for those changes to take place. I feel like in here, let's actually make this route. Let's get rid of this one, because when they go to our website, the first thing that we want to show them is our React app. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm just going to get rid of this index router, which is just that welcome page, and also just remove it here in the front, at the top. Okay, we're going to see an interesting case, but now I refresh this. Oh, did my server restart? No, but I made those changes in the backend, so I don't need to rebuild the React part. Let me try to hard refresh. This is interesting. Let me kill the, start again. Oh, okay. I don't get this. Let's try to do npm start. Let's try to go in a incognito window. still shows this. Slash whatever shows the React app. I'm not sure if this has another route handling then that is. Oh, maybe it's this. That's really weird. A way in which we could fix it is repeating ourselves a bit, where I could set this one in here and just be like, if it goes to slash, just send them there. If it goes to anything else, send. Let's try this out. Restart the server. Yeah, so that works. Oh, this is an interesting case. So it says as logged in, login, logged in, go to users. This is an interesting case. But before we address this, any questions or comments about the building the app and having our backend server serve the built React app? Let's see if we do. Oh, so I think it was working. It's just that the browser was keeping some cache before. Yeah, it was. This works still. Oh yeah, that's the problem that we're gonna see next. This was working all along. It's just that the browser was keeping some cache information. But now, once we see here, this is why these applications are known as a single page app, because your server receives a request to show the index HTML file, and that's it. After the browser receives the index HTML file, all the other stuff that happens in our front end is through JavaScript running in the browser. We never serve any other page with our server. See, we only serve one page. This is why these are known as single page applications. That and the fact that all the routing that we see happening in the front end is an illusion. Basically, that for the most part, the user doesn't need to know that it's not real.
So by erasing the first route, that's enough to fix that?
Yeah, and I had to open the developer tools, because in the developer tools I have this setting which is disabling cache. I was getting the error where I removed it and it was still showing up because the server was keeping some cache where that information was being still set.
Whenever I open it, I shouldn't have a problem.
Yeah, you shouldn't have a problem. Okay, so then this from this setup, we could deploy to Heroku. Let's actually do that. So now git status. Let's commit these changes. Also, let me get rid of the index here. Routes, this index. get rid of that. I should check that the app still runs, just in case. Cool, our app still runs. So note that this is our backend. This is our backend app. We're sending, when I hit enter, the browser is sending a GET request to my backend. My backend says that this is not /user, this is not /auth. Then it should send the file that we specified here, which is the index.html that we built from our React app. And once that HTML file makes it to, if we actually inspect it here, once that HTML file makes it into the browser, this HTML file actually loads all our JavaScript, these two files. And then, then the router is doing this changing in the DOM for us, and so on. But it's all being done in JavaScript. You can see that there is no other network requests for other pages being made. Okay, so let's deploy this to Heroku. Now we have one app, basically. We have our backend and the built version of our front end working in tandem. So if we do git status, let's do git add everything. Let's do git commit. And let's see, what did we do? We set up server to serve our built React app. That's what we did. Now let's do push origin master. When you can do git push without origin master, and it just knows where to push to. If you only have one, and if you have set it up as a default. Now we need to create a Heroku app. How do we create a Heroku app? We could create it through the site, but we can also do it with the terminal. Janesh? Heroku create. Let's try to get a name for it. Let's call it deployment full stack. See if it's available. It's available. Now, what did this do? Two things. Oh, what are you getting an error or something?
I'm just getting a blank screen.
What is the URL in the browser? Okay. Slash what? And and you have this in your app.js?
I have that. Yeah.
And you also have this line here?
No.
Oh, I should have let this one uncommented.
Oh, I have to comment that out.
No. This you can leave it as it is.
Oh, it's just that thing.
This line doesn't have to be commented.
Oh, that can
That can stay there.
Why is it good to keep it?